if you're so busy, you can't even be with yourself, you're missing every message your body is trying to communicate with you emotionally and energetically. And if you can learn how to be with yourself and have that self-awareness, you're opening your life to possibility that just doesn't make sense to the average person who is very shut off.
Hey, my friend, how you doing? This is Sasha, and you're listening to Enlivened.
So welcome everybody to a new episode of the ENLIVENed Podcast. Today, my guest is MACIE RENAE. MACIE, would you like to briefly introduce yourself for everybody?
Yes, I'd love to. So I'm MACIE RENAE, and I'm a self-mastery life coach. My life was absolutely transformed years ago, getting into personal development and then hiring my own coach about 4 years ago. And I had such a big transformation from everything that I experienced in my life, which I'm sure we'll touch on different things today, that I decided this is what I wanted to devote my life to, is working on constant evolution, constant growth, becoming your highest self. So I have a podcast, and I help my clients one-on-one. And actually my background is occupational therapy. So a lot of times I bring in my education as well and work with people who battle a lot of their own self-sabotage, just not feeling connected to themselves and feeling very out of body autopilot, bringing everything back together, healing, and then moving forward so that they can live their best life.
The self-sabotage thing, what is that? Like, can you explain what it is for a person who's new to this personal development journey and they're like, what is self-sabotage?
Yeah. The way that I look at self-sabotage is, I think that from our past experiences, we hold a lot of our traumas, the difficult things that we've been through in our body and in our mind. And it's very easy to go on about life and be like, you know what, this is something that I used to do. You know what, I'm just going to put on my big girl panties and handle it, and it's going to be no big deal, and I'm going to move on. But I wasn't ever actually addressing the things that caused me pain in the past. And when we're not addressing it, it's stored in our subconscious, and it shows up in other parts of our life. And I think you probably know this, but energetically, we attract things that we don't want to attract. And we start calling things in from a place of woundedness rather than, feeling liberated and alive and free. And it's something that can really hold us down. So when I say self-sabotaging, a lot of times I'm referring to the mind that has this past history, is bringing everything into the present moment, and then you're creating from that place. And that's usually not where we're trying to go, So when we're self-sabotaging, it's all of these thoughts in our mind that are just not serving us. They're not useful. We have to address them so that we can move forward and have that power back.
If someone's listening right now and they want to know what in their life could be self-sabotage, could you give us maybe one or two examples of what self-sabotage can possibly look like?
Yeah, I think something that comes up a lot is the feeling of I'm not worthy, or when we see other people that maybe have things that we desire, we automatically take ourselves out of it. And maybe feel angry, or, we have thoughts about them, and we have thoughts about the situation. And we think that we're exempt from that because we're not worthy of it, or we don't feel like we're smart enough, good enough. And then a lot of times we'll bring in our past. Well, I can't have that because I have this, insert whatever past story that they have, and they've really made that who they are today. So whenever, when I think of self-sabotaging, and like even me and the things I had to work on, it was like, you're really not your story. And while I can bring in a bunch of, tell people a bunch of things that I've gone through, it's like, is that where I'm actually trying to go? So are my thoughts helping me get to the place that I want to go?
What does it mean to have self-mastery? Like, what does it mean to have mastery over ourselves?
Yeah. So the way that I look at this is it's constant awareness of where you're at. So what I love about what you just said, because this is something that I help my clients with a lot, is I call it buffering, when we numb ourselves out. We fill our time with something else. And this was really, like, when I think back, I love that you said that. This is really where I self-sabotage myself unknowingly, because I did not like the way that I felt being in my own company. I felt like I was going to crawl out of my skin. I felt like I can't be alone with myself. I can't not be busy, because if I'm not busy doing something all the time, I start to get anxiety and I start to freak out. And then I'm going to go get in the pantry and get food, or I'm going to go have the drink of alcohol, or I'm going to go to the gym for way longer than a normal gym session would be. If you're filling your time because you can't be with yourself, because being with ourselves welcomes all of the subconscious stuff that tries to arise to be like, here, there's something to teach you here. There's a lesson, and it causes negative emotion. And we don't like that. So we're like, okay, well, I got to go to the gym. And we have this to-do list of everything we need to get done. And what that looks like is, it's healthy to go to the gym, but how long are you there? Are you actually being productive? Are you dragging it out so that you don't have to go do other things? And so I realized, like, a big buffer for me was social media. I could scroll on it for hours and not think anything of it. I felt like I was being productive, like having an online business. I would be like, oh, but I'm just working and I'm just studying and I'm just taking in everybody's information and becoming better. But really, if I was honest with myself, it was like, no, you're using this to not have to do the work. So self-mastery is really about being aware of the work is not an easy path, but it's a constant, and it takes a lot of awareness to be like, you know what, I want to learn how to manage my mind and master that. I want to learn how to manage my energy and master that. I want to learn how to be emotionally intelligent and master that. And it's a constant process. So when I am focusing on self-mastery for myself and my clients, what that means is a commitment to lifelong evolution.
What's your sign? Like, I want to know.
I am a Libra, and then
You are a Libra. You feel like a Libra to me.
Yeah, I'm a Libra, and then my moon is Scorpio, and then and then my rising sign is Leo.
Did we talk about this, or was this
No, we didn't.
I was gonna say, you have a very strong Libra energy. You have this like lioness essence too, and your moon is Scorpio, which is my husband's moon as well, and I'm very familiar with that intensity.
Yes.
It's attractive. It's very sexy. It's magnetic, and I just love that combination. It's such a badass, and I think it represents you really well.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. What is your Enneagram?
I think it's a 2-wing 3.
Oh, the person I had on the podcast yesterday, same thing.
Really?
Exact same thing. That's wow, right? Like, it's crazy.
Yes.
When we're talking about, you said it's constant awareness, constant consciousness around what we're doing and why we're doing the thing. And we need to have more self-awareness. And this is actually my work. Like, I work with astrology to bring self-awareness to people, to like the archetypes within them. But for you, what are the ways that you, or maybe the tools that you use to bring more self-awareness? Is it meditation? Like, what do you do to bring
It's
more?
a lot of sitting with myself. So I do a lot of sitting with myself. It sounds silly, but sometimes when my environment around me feels very overwhelming, or I feel like I could just get lost in the environment of things I need to do around my house, I'll go get in my car, park at the park, and literally just sit there and just like allow, like, hearing the trees and the wind and the, taking the fresh air. And I just really let my mind go where it needs to go to let me be aware of like what's coming up. And I spend a lot of time with myself. That's like crucial for me in being more self-aware. It's like, okay, what's coming up for me? What are my observations? What's bubbling up as far as emotions? What thoughts am I having? That is really big for me. And then I journal. I really like to journal and just put things on paper. And I will occasionally meditate. It's a practice I'm trying to become better at, for sure. I'm really good at sitting with myself in the quiet, but really adding breathing in and going there, with that heart-brain coherence is a work in progress. That is something that I want to get better at, for sure.
Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, heartbreak coherence is so it starts with the way that we're breathing. In meditation, they teach this. When you're breathing in and you're like squeezing your diaphragm, what that does is it pulls energy up to the brain, and your brain has this little area in the back of it called your pineal gland. And what it does is it begins to crystallize, which is so cool. I think that is so awesome. It begins to crystallize. And as your eyes are shut, then melatonin starts to release. And when you get connected in that way, what you're doing is you're moving energy up from the heart into the brain. And that pineal gland is then what takes us into that expanded place. What's really like possible, that place of, or I guess what, if you're here, you would be like, well, it's impossible. It takes you to that place where you have that expanded consciousness of just, you're this little blimp in this big world full of possibility. And I think that that's the power of meditation. They say when you get that heart-brain coherence, it actually changes your brain waves and your state of being. And that's what speeds up time. You've heard, Melanie talk about that because we've been in her programs. That's what actually eliminates, that time constraint that we feel in our logical everyday world. And it's really where you can create whatever it is that you want, and where people, like when you hear the stories, like people heal themselves from cancer, people heal themselves from, they've been blind their entire life, and suddenly in this practice, they're not. It sounds very, very bizarre, but most of us in life don't ever experience that because we don't like being with ourselves. So that's kind of where my work comes full circle. If you're so busy, you can't even be with yourself, you're missing every message your body is trying to communicate with you emotionally and energetically. And if you can learn how to be with yourself and have that self-awareness, you're opening your life to possibility that just doesn't make sense to the average person who is very shut off.
Right. I love the way you just explained that. Can we actually rewind for a second?
Yeah.
And go back to Macy.
Mm-hmm.
So Macy was the Macy she's now.
Yeah.
And why did previous Macy decide to go into personal development and become extremely wise and become even like why did you make a decision to, like, what was alive inside of you that brought you to occupational therapy, and then what made you decide to go into coaching?
Perfect. So I can answer this question. It might be a little bit lengthy, but I like to go all out.
Please take all of the time in the world. I'm like such a sucker for podcasts to go into stories, because I love when people can see themselves in that story. So I would love to gift that to the listeners. Take your time.
Yeah. So my story starts really like back all the way to conception, actually. My mom skipped school, and then she was raped and she got pregnant with me. And that caused a lot of, trauma for her. Obviously, it caused trauma within my family. I'm biracial, so if we bring up anything with race later, that, I can certainly touch on that. But my grandparents at the time felt that the right thing to do was for my mom to have an abortion, because she was 15 years old at the time. And they thought, you're not ready to have a kid. This was so traumatic. Like, we don't believe in this. And they made her have the abortion. So she did the series of pills that have, it's a 97% success rate for aborting the fetus, and it didn't work. And when it didn't work, then when it didn't work, it must be the Leo in me, right? That fire, like, nope, I've got a message.
I'm coming.
Yeah. Yes. And then, throughout my childhood, there were a series of events. My mom ended up getting married. She married a narcissist, and she ended up being diagnosed with bipolar 1 mania disorder. And so all of these different events, coming up in life, my mom really wanted me to meet my biological dad. That felt traumatic to me. I mean, I could go on and on and on and write a book, actually, which I'm gonna. Yeah, there's been so many different events and a collection of traumas. And I started therapy when I was about 6 years old and went through all the way until 23. And it's funny what brought me to personal development. What brought me to personal development was actually being in a relationship marketing company. And what that did was ignite in me this, awareness that there's more. Like I was taught from my family who didn't have that awareness, right? Like the way to make it, the way to have everything you wanted was the traditional go to college, get a degree. And I knew that I loved the health field. I knew that I loved helping people, especially with everything that I had been through. So that seemed like the way. And before I was even done with my master's degree, I was like, there's more. I just know that there's more. I feel so limited in this current paradigm where people say, this is it.
Yeah, fuck that. Sorry.
Yeah.
But like, yeah. I feel that too. And I feel like that's an intuition that I think all of us feel, but we can't pinpoint the word.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can't say, is this it? So sorry, keep going. This is so
That's
cool.
okay. So, as I was in this relationship marketing company, they talked about, if you want to grow and expand and have it all, personal development is huge. I didn't even know what personal development was. It was never a piece of my life. And when I got in, it was like a door opened. As soon as I entered that door, it was like, whoa, I will never be able to let this go. And I can say I've done some sort of personal development every day for the last 6 years. Oh. It's never something that isn't just totally, it is in my life, and it's here to stay. And it began to help me grow and evolve and change. And then 4 years ago, I was reading a book, You Are a Badass by Jen Sincero.
Yesterday on the podcast, I have chills everywhere because that's the book the guest spoke about. You guys need to work together. I'm going to cry. This is crazy. I have chills everywhere right now. That's okay. Keep going. Sorry. This is really wild. Okay. Keep going.
Oh my gosh. So I was reading her book and she talked about in the end of the book, when you feel like you've hit a wall, it's probably time to hire a life coach. And that's where I felt like I was. Surface level, what I wanted, because I thought it was going to be the thing that fixed everything, was money. And I felt like if I just had more money, I'd be happy, and I think a lot of people have that thought. Like if I just had more.
Every friend I have, every single person.
Right. So I hired my life coach to help me, hilariously enough, get to this level where I was going to be, this rich person. So she ended up basically peeling me like an onion and was like, no, there's a lot of layers here. And there's a lot of stuff that you've been bypassing because you don't want to look at it. Like it took me probably 6 weeks to even share my story. I mean, if you would have asked me to share anything I've shared, 6 years ago, it would have been, I can't do that because I'll hurt my mom. I'll hurt my stepdad. I'll hurt, it was just like, I couldn't imagine being authentic when it was going to involve someone else. Does that make sense? But that's a part of my story.
I think I'm navigating that still. Like, I think I have to go deeper with my story. So you're bringing awareness to me now. I'm like, I need to learn from Macy. So please continue.
So that became the work for me. It was learning how to forgive. It was learning how to understand my own needs, my own desires. It was learning how to coexist with people who I had to learn did the best they knew how, and how my own thinking around what they did or didn't do, it was kind of like I had to learn how to have my own back, and how I had to witness like all the ways I did have my own back as a child, even though as a child it was like I resented them for it. Does that make sense?
You're speaking to somebody who like loves your words right now. So thank you.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
so much awareness on how to see not the solution, sorry, the situation from a higher perspective. It's almost like you've just zoomed out and you're taking it as a neutral, as opposed to being in the story and feeling like a victim. You're like, these people are not perfect. I'm not perfect. We're learning together. Everybody's the teacher, right?
Yeah.
And I love what you said about forgiveness. Forgiveness has been the catalyst of my transformation, because I was so adamant about the fact that people had wronged me. And that's why I was fucked up. I was fucked up because people mistreated me. I hung on to it. I was like, well, I can't accomplish anything because like people fucked me over. So like I'm forever. So please, I have my own story, but today you are on. So tell us how. Like, what does forgiveness work mean to you? And what does it actually look like?
Well, it's funny that you say that, because that's kind of where, like, whenever I had one of my biggest breakthroughs that I've ever had, it was when I had this full circle moment. So I'll go back a little bit, but when I was 2 years old, despite, everything that my mom and stepdad and my grandparents, because the part that I did forget to tell you guys is when I was born at the hospital, my grandma and grandpa had tricked my mom into signing legal guardianship papers. So my mom felt like, I've fought for her. You made me get the abortion. Then you tried to put her up for adoption. You don't want me to have her. And then birthed me in the hospital. And then, at 16 at this point, signs papers that she thinks are hospital papers. And it was my grandparents saying, no, we're taking her. And that level of pain that caused my mom caused her to raise me in very much a way of, you need to hate people. You need to be resentful. You need to, we need to punish, and you should want to be with me, and you need to pick me and choose me. And so as a kid, I felt like, who do I choose? Who do I choose? And as a Libra, when you want everything balanced and
oh my
fair
gosh,
and equal.
You're so interesting. Keep going. This is so good.
And you get, pulled in multiple directions of, do I hate my grandparents for taking me? Do I hate, what do I do? Because my mom stayed with the narcissist. She's still with them. And my sisters have been raised in that trauma. So as a kid, it was like, well, my grandparents kind of rescued me because I didn't have to deal with everything head on. But I also understand that I was kind of stolen. I just had like all of these thoughts that definitely made me feel almost resentful towards everybody. And ultimately what it catered in me was this feeling of abandonment. Nobody really wants me for some reason, right? It's weird what our brain comes up with. Like, nobody wants me. I'm not lovable. Like, I shouldn't be here. Like, what's even my purpose? And it was this cycle that kind of perpetuated itself. For me, that full circle moment was, I was at a life coach retreat. And they were working on, what is your youngest traumatic memory? Because the way that the brain works, at your youngest traumatic memory that you can remember, every decision that you make from that point forward is based on trying to run from the trauma. So your body is trying to not have to experience that again. But as we talked about earlier, if it's not actually healed and it's just bypassed, you attract it.
Right.
So I was sitting in this retreat. They had asked me what my youngest childhood memory was. It was 2 years old when my grandparents said, Macy can go live with you, talking about my mom and stepdad. Just because we have guardianship of her doesn't mean that we're going to take her from you. We just wanted to have the ability to keep her safe. So I'm living with my mom and stepdad, and I still remember this. I mean, it's like burned in my brain, where my stepdad, for some reason, came home and he was very angry. And I can remember my mom dang near busting down my bedroom door, like grabbing me up by the arm like this and telling me, we have to go, we have to go, we have to go. And she was crying. She was screaming at him. We get to the front door and she has one hand behind her back trying to get the door open while keeping her eyes on him and her hand on me. And she's begging and pleading, don't do this, please don't do this, please don't do this. And I can still hear like the yelling. I can't remember what he's saying, obviously, but I can still hear like the echoes and the vibration of just how traumatic that was for me at 2. And we get in the car and we leave. And I remember that's the youngest thing that I can remember happening, you know? And I was telling my coaches this. Actually, Melanie was there. It was an in-person, and she was there. And she said, "Can you see how you've created everything that you're experiencing now?" And I couldn't. So at that time when I was at that retreat, my background is occupational therapy. That's what I went to college for. And I worked with birth to age 3 population. And I was at that retreat very triggered. Like, I don't want to do this the rest of my life. This just feels very limiting, and I'm triggered. And every time I go into a family home, like I feel miserable and I can't do this. And I was angry. It was like, I want so many other things to work, and I'm angry. Like, I'm here because my mom did this. I'm here because my stepdad did this. I'm here because my grandparents did this. And I was victim mode. And my other coach said, "You know what? This can all change in the matter of an instant if you can just really dig deep and realize how you've gotten yourself here." And I'm like, I was like a brick wall, because we love to hold on to our stories. They're serving us in some way. And it could be serving us from being really great, you know, like being afraid of failure, being afraid of going all in. And she said, "I want you to really think about how where you are today, you've created." And I sat there for a second, and I was like, I don't see it. And she said, "What do you do for a living?" Or she said, what was your youngest childhood memory? And I was kind of frustrated, because I'm like, I just told you it was when I was 2 years old. I'm very frustrated because I don't want to relive that again, you know? And then she said, "Exactly. And what age are the children that you work with?" And I sobbed. I was like, "They're 2, you know?" And it was like that full circle moment of, my trauma's created this because I've been avoiding myself my entire life. I've been running away from the thing that scarred me my entire life. And look at where it got me, right where the signs just keep showing up, because there's something to work on, and I'm running from myself. And it was just like that full circle moment of, this is why forgiveness work is important. This is why self-mastery is important. This is why, because this isn't what I want to experience the next 40 years of my life, 50, 60 years. I want to experience freedom, joy, true being able to have great relationships with people. I want it all. And I can't have that if I'm not willing to be with myself.
Macy, you're so beautiful. The way you explain that story, your self-awareness around the story, the way that you are able to share your story from an empowered perspective right now, you're probably shining so much light for people listening, and they're probably like, "Oh, what? This girl is just breaking my bullshit. What?"
Love it.
I love the way that you're able to say, "This happened when I was 2. And this happened again." And it's like you repeat the pattern, we repeat the pattern until we are ready to see it. And then when we're able to finally recognize it, we sob for 45 minutes, or sometimes it's a week, sometimes a month of weird energy that's coming out.
Yes.
Fuck, I'm actually responsible for this. Okay. And I think that's when we get out of victim, and we get out of blaming everybody, and we get out of just putting the problem outside of ourselves, and we recognize that we caused it. When I was talking to you before this, you said something about, I want to heal myself, and I want to continue to do personal development so that I don't impose my wounds on other people. Mm-hmm. Could you explain how you went from obviously your story is incredible. You have your Scorpio moon, so much Scorpio energy in your story. Mm-hmm. We know that. But how did you go from a childhood with so much trauma and a lot of wounds? How do you not hurt others?
So I definitely wounded people growing up. I blamed a lot of the things that I was experiencing. Every single time I was triggered, I would explode, or I'd hold things in for a very long time and then explode and then punish. I would say a huge piece of this coming up was with even my husband. We're high school sweethearts, so we've been together 11 years. But where I started recognizing, okay, this is me. I hope you can hear me because someone, of course, is cutting grass right next to my window. But it's, when I saw this coming up for me, it was my husband would do something and it would be very innocent. Like, here's a crazy example. One time he was saying something and he laughed about it. And I was infuriated at the way that he laughed, the tone of his voice in the laugh, because my stepfather would have that same laugh after he would insult someone. And that's when I started to recognize I'm sabotaging other relationships where they have not actually done anything to me, but my brain is making it seem like they are, with this like foggy perception because of unhealed things. So when I started recognizing that that's what I was doing, it was very, it became very important for me to be like, okay, I can recognize how my mother's wounds impacted my life and created trauma for me. And I think that it's only fair that I work on myself so that I can hold space for people who are going through their own wounds without making their wounds mine. What I tell my clients to do is observe every time they're triggered. I feel like every time you have a negative emotional response, there's something there. Sometimes it's just our brain being a little bit crazy. You know, sometimes it's coming from past things that we haven't dealt with that have piled on and piled on and piled on. But I always feel like there's a reason why we're being triggered. So the way that I look at this is like, if my client comes to me and they're sharing something very personal, and I kind of feel like offended by it or icky about it, or I'm like, wow, that's mine, right? Like, I don't need to jump in the pool and then sabotage this because of my own thoughts. Like, clearly there's something that ignited in me that needs exploring on my behalf. I make a mental note of that. I might even write it down, like, ooh, I was triggered when they said this. But when I'm with my client, that is theirs. Why? I can't impose my own thoughts and beliefs on them trying to work on healing their trauma. Mm-hmm. So I kind of I do this thing where I kind of separate myself. It's almost like I've got this piece of me that just kind of like duplicates and comes out and says, this part is capable of holding this space, and anything that I notice becomes a trigger for me is something to be explored for me in my own time. It has nothing to do with my client.
I actually want to ask you, what do you believe is your contribution to the earth?
Yeah, I do feel like it's helping people with a greater awareness, because I really want to live in a world with connection and love. And the only way that we can do that is to be self-aware. If I'm pointing the finger and blaming everyone and not willing to look at my own stuff and everybody else is the problem, then we don't get anywhere. We can't communicate and connect with people when we're coming from a place of anger and resentment and blaming. Right. Because immediately it creates defensiveness. I mean, you think about when someone blames you for something, even if you didn't do it, there's an immediate wall. And what I desire is more people working on their own stuff and healing their own stuff, so we can hold space for the people who maybe aren't there yet. And the more that we can do that, the more connectedness there will be. And I really feel like that is my mission. How can I help you become so self-aware that you heal yourself and you can hold space for the people who aren't there yet?
Oh, this is so good. Just like you saying that, in my body, it felt like there's oils, like divine oils running through my veins. Like, I'm just like, yes. This is so good. This is so good, Macy. Like, I just want to share you in your message as loud as possible, because I support your mission, and you're doing a fantastic job at it, might I say. There's a lot going on in the media right now. How can we navigate what's going on, be aware of what's going on in the world, share our magic, and at the same time be mindful. Can you please share your perspective?
I definitely have my own boundaries around what I consume and what I allow myself to consume, because there's so many sides and there's so many different viewpoints. And remember, we bring our viewpoints in from past experiences. So if people are bringing their viewpoints in from past unhealed trauma, I get to decide if I want that to be mine or not. And I have enough self-awareness to know that sometimes I don't want that to be mine. So I intuitively know when to step back. Like, does this feel good to me? Like, where is even the line for me of not being completely ignorant, right? And knowing the general consensus of what's going on, but then dropping in intuitively and being like, what feels good? What feels bad?
And did you always know intuitively that something wasn't good for you about the news?
It took a lot of practice. I think it's been developed to a very high level the more self-aware I've been and the more self-mastery work I do on myself. So I try not to get too into someone else's story. Like, and I know sometimes people think like that makes you insensitive or that makes you not aware.
Oh my gosh.
But I feel like it's very much the opposite. Like, what I'm always trying to practice doing, especially when it comes to political and even race, as someone that's biracial, is knowing my own triggers, knowing my own past traumas, right? Like, so I've made an effort to make sure I'm looking at that, I'm healing that. And when people come, because when people come to you with big issues, they're ready to fight. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. They're fighting for what they believe in. But where my awareness goes is, are they fighting from the wounded, or are they fighting from this self-awareness and the forgiveness? And I get to decide what I take from that. And when someone is very wounded, what I practice is, I'm going to hold the space for you. You deserve to feel everything you're feeling. You're allowed to be angry. And when they start saying their story, I understand it. I understand exactly why you're feeling what you feel. But what I also know is, if you don't heal it, this story that you're living in right now is always going to be the story. And if you don't like the overall results that you're getting, there has to be a different mind-body experience. So
Good.
I am very, I set boundaries with how much I'm willing to take. And sometimes when that means like people are in a fight, and I'm also, again, Libra energy. So Libra is very much like, we really just want everyone to love each other and there to be balance and order. And of course it's a beautiful thing, but then we also need the people that fight for what they believe in at the same time. I think my overall message is, be aware enough to know where that fight is coming from, because you can be heard a lot louder if it's coming from a place of healing, because then you can speak through connection and love and understanding of knowing how to hold space, rather than resentment, anger, which ultimately causes more division. And I think that that's where we feel stress on social media. We're fighting from a place of hatred, anger, resentment. And what does it do? Everybody just ends up deleting people on Facebook. Like, I can't be around this person. I can't coexist with this person. I hate people, and I'm not going to be, like, I still go through that sometimes. Sometimes I am so triggered by things I see because I thought this person thought this way, and I will see something where maybe they don't think the way that I'm thinking. And sometimes I will get triggered and I'll be like, I'm going to go buy an island. And you've probably seen those posts.
I did. I'm so curious about your perspective.
Yeah.
I love that you say, like, bringing clean, conscious energy. Like, what is coming through me? Is this an energy of, I want to bring change for the future? Mm-hmm. Or am I hating on somebody else's contribution to the earth?
Mm-hmm.
That's another thing, right?
Yeah. I look at the way that I kind of know if I'm actually being neutral is the place where can I observe any negative emotion I'm having in my body, right? And I sit with myself. I allow myself to feel that negative emotion. It's okay for me to feel it. what I'm always trying to do is, and I tell my clients to do, is make sure you're aware of what thoughts are creating that. So sometimes thoughts that come up, especially when it comes to like politics, is they're so stupid, they're insensitive, they're racist, they don't get it, and when we're thinking those thoughts, it definitely feels horrendous. And a lot of times too, there's a story attached. There's like something we've experienced in the past of our real life experience that is amplifying it. So what I will do is like try to understand where my perspective is coming from and allow myself that moment to cool down, because the quote that I love is, when emotions are high, intelligence is low. It's so true. Because when we're angry, how do we respond versus if we've had a few moments to collect, and so I collect myself, and then I think, what part of this is bothering me? What's the overall message I would love for this person to know? And can I say that from a loving place, not I'm gonna get you back, I hope karma bites you in the ass, like I want to come to people and be like, okay, this is what my perspective, and deliver it in a loving place. And I can do that once I've been with myself. But if I'm not willing to be with myself and I'm just responding simply because they triggered me, they're not going to hear my message anyways. That's when people are like, well, deleted her. Did you see her comments? I deleted her. It's like,
exactly.
You didn't even get your message across,
Absolutely. What inspires you to post your beliefs?
I've definitely been, like, I guess you would say, triggered by things that I've seen on Facebook. And sometimes it's because what I found, like, I desire that level of freedom where they can just speak so openly about it, even if maybe they haven't processed it, they just say it. And I'm like, ooh, I kind of love, enjoy that, but I'm triggered by it because it's like, whoa. And then there are other times where it's simply, I'm triggered because I don't agree with it at all, and when it's at the moments that I don't agree with it, I step back and ask myself, like, how much energy do I want to give to this?
Oh.
Like, because my energy is very sacred. So I have to think, like, do I actually want to own what they're saying as mine? And this came from a book I was reading. It's like, let me try and think of which one it was. I want to say it's the book called The Angry Therapist by John Kim. But there's a part in there where he talks about a Buddhist monk that goes to a village every single day and, walks through, and there's all these like stands, like fruit stands, and, these wicker baskets and people that are making all these things. And there's this man that shouts horrible things at him every single day as he walks through this village. And day after day, no matter what he shouts, how insulting he is, how nasty he is to this monk, he never says anything. He just keeps walking through the village, and day after day. And finally that agitates the man. And one day when he walks through the village, he says, hey, every day you walk through this village, and every day I say the nastiest, meanest possible things that I can say to you. Why don't you ever yell at me back? Why don't you argue with me? Why don't you do all of that? And the Buddhist monk looks at him and he says, if someone tries to hand you a gift and you decline, to whom does the gift belong? And when I read that, I was like, my brain exploded. And I really learned then, not everything is mine to own. And the moment that I am getting into it with someone whose message doesn't match mine, I'm in that moment owning it. I'm owning their energy. I'm owning their message. I made it mine. I accepted their gift to go into that pool. And is that actually a pool I want to go into? So now I'm just very aware of that. Do I want to go in the pool? Sometimes I do. Sometimes I feel like saying a little something, you know what I mean? But most of the time, no, because most of the time, like, my energy is so sacred. I have a message. I'm going to keep sharing my message. I don't need to worry about this person that maybe doesn't get it. And maybe when I come to a loving place, they'll see something and we can have a very adult conversation about it.
That was so well put, Macy. That was so good. You said, I have a message to share and I'm going to share it regardless of what people say. What is your message?
Work on yourself. Focus always. It always comes back to you. There's lessons to be learned in every experience that you're experiencing in life and every emotion that you feel. And it's never wrong to feel the way that you're feeling, but it's a great piece of knowledge as to how to get to your next level. So, I think it just comes down to that self-mastery work is so very important. Like, you can create and you can have it all. And it comes down to you taking ultimate radical responsibility for everything that you're creating and being the driver of your life and not the victim in the passenger seat that's like, the reason I didn't make it was because they're driving and, they were crazy and they took a wrong turn. Like, it's just so much easier to be in the driver's seat. We just have to step into that.
When I started wanting to put boundaries around my time, wanted to explore my own mind, be with myself, just to go back on what you were talking about in the beginning, I actually got projections of others directed at me saying that I was very selfish and that because, I'm not prioritizing their idea of what I should do. I'm prioritizing my idea of what I should do. And so they're like, you're selfish. You only think of yourself. You're working on yourself all the time. You take classes for yourself all the time. You're so selfish. You don't think about others.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
I giggle at that because the way that I can give my best to everyone else is if my cup is full. And it's such a cliche, but it's like, you cannot give that of what you do not have. And it is very important to know yourself, know your needs, know when you feel empty or you need to refill. Otherwise, what comes at the people who want your attention is not your best self. And those are the moments where you fight and you argue and you grow resentful because your needs aren't met. And I laugh about this too, because I learned in coaching very early on that all of us have what she would call a manual. And this manual is the book that's in your mind of how you want people to be, what you think they should say, what you think that they should do. And it ultimately comes down to, I want you to be this way so I feel better, which is an ego place, right? It's like, if you would just be XYZ or do XYZ or stop doing your personal development every single day and care about me, like, I would feel better. Because they're not giving that to themselves first. So they're seeking it externally. So when people do that, I'm like, I understand it, but I've learned how to meet my own needs so that first of all, I don't need the external things to fill me up. But secondly, when I do still feel like there's something I would like, I can come and approach that person from a place of love, not a place of I'm already empty and now I'm mad. I'm full. I knew how to give it to myself. Now I'm going to ask you for things that I enjoy. Kind of like, it's kind of like if you want your husband to get you flowers all the time and he doesn't, he's like, well, flowers die and blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, I can give that to myself. I love me enough to do that. It sounds stupid, but like, I will do that for myself because it makes me feel good. I can make myself feel good. And when you come from that loving place, and sometimes you're modeling this energy of I know how to treat me. I value me. When you value and you teach people like your standards, sometimes energetically those people start doing that because they see that that's the standard that you abide by for yourself. And if you do need to ask for it, like let's say you're doing it and you're just like, it would just really be nice. If you've come from a place of love, you can lovingly go to that person and say, you know what makes me feel so good is just having fresh flowers. And, and it's not coming from a place of like, I need you to do that, or you're not the person for me, or you know what I mean?
You've communicated how to please you. So if they want to please you, they know how, but it's not like you have to.
And think about it. When you have to force someone, it never feels good anyways, because how many times do we see women or men being like, well, do you want to do that? And they're like, well, not really. And like, let's say you haven't given it to yourself. And they're like, well, I want you to want to do it. It's like, even if they do it, you're still not satisfied because you're like, I want you to be able to do it, and you're like still exploding. And then they're frustrated because they're like, well, I don't want to do it, but now, and then they feel guilted. So it's not an energy that's coming from a clean place.
Not clean. And I've definitely been guilty of that. Like I'm definitely on my path now that I've been on this path for a while that there's so many things I don't do anymore, but I was the poster child of doing all that wrong. Like, and that's why I have such great awareness on it now, but I was really the worst case scenario that and I was also that person that was like, I do everything for you. Like I did everything. Now you have to do that. And it was like this manual that you were like, is that from Brooke Castillo? And I feel like that's
more than likely, yes.
Yeah, but she's such a legend. If you guys don't know who she is, by the way, like
she's incredible,
fucking legend. I love the way she giggles. Like when she shares wisdom, she's just like, that's funny, like, you know. But I love that you just explained it so well. What would you say if your client came to you today and said, I don't understand, like I'm doing everything, Macy, I'm doing everything, and he doesn't or she doesn't do anything, like she doesn't want to, she just wants to watch TV or play video games. Like I want my husband to want what I want my husband to do, like that manual that we have in our head.
Yeah.
How do you help them shift?
Yeah, I've definitely had clients that have done this.
It's like a common thing, right? Yeah. I was guilty of this.
Yeah. I usually start with, what are you needing? So if they want attention, it's like, are you giving yourself the attention that you're needing? I always redirect it. It's very much Byron Katie. I love Byron Katie. Do you follow her? Okay.
Obsessed.
But yeah, I go back to the turnaround of turn it back on you. Because when you're seeking something outside of yourself, and it's okay to want that. It's a perfect indication of something feels like it's missing for me. Start with giving that to yourself. And if you feel like you can't give that to yourself, why? So then we go deeper. Why do you feel like you can't give that to yourself? That usually uncovers things from childhood, like I'm not worthy, I was abandoned, I didn't feel like I was paid attention to. And it's like, perfect. So once we start working through all of that, then once they've given it to themselves, then they're able to, one, a lot of times they don't even need it. So they have gratitude for when they receive what they're receiving, because they didn't have to force it out of someone. You know what I mean? It's like they see the perspective shifts so much. And if you still need something, again, you're able to ask from a loving place, not a place of like, I need you to be more, I need you to be different. I need another partner. You're not good enough. You know what I mean? Like whatever it is.
We've been together for 11 years, right?
We've been together for 11 years. We've been married for 2.
You evolved. You changed, like in that relationship. I'm also married. I've been married 5 years with my husband 7. And we're both quite young to be have like these long relationships. We're like breaking status quo. Oh my God.
I know.
I want to know your Macy's like perspective on, can you change within a relationship even if your partner isn't with you every step of the way? And what does that look like when you evolve in a marriage?
Yeah. It's definitely, I feel like it's been messy at times. I'll be honest. There early on, I went through a little bit of growth when we first started dating, and then I kind of stepped back, and I was being a victim to all of my trauma at that point. My dad's family was trying to come into my life, and I just literally had a mental breakdown, and then my husband was growing, and then I felt the pull of like, oh no, I'm going to be left. He's growing. You know what I mean? And then I went through periods where like I'm growing, and then he wasn't. And so it's been like this thing. Now, thankfully, I do think, we've grown enough at a pace together to where it's been like, we've been able to hold space for each other. But I do see like this being a challenge in some of my client relationships where they're like, I'm growing, I care to change, I care to evolve. They want to be the same way that they've been forever. And I always tell them that's up for you to decide. I can never choose what you decide to do in your life, or, but I think, even being very familiar with energy, that when we're on a different frequency, there's tension. And that's why we lose sometimes our friends. Our friends are like, you're changing, you're this, you're that. I want you to be the same person, but your energetic vibration is completely different at that point. And either people rise up to you or they kind of fall behind. And what I teach my clients is that you can still engage with those people that you've left energetically, but you get to decide that. And you also get to decide like where you're going, and your partner gets to decide where they're going in their life. And if it gets to a point where it just doesn't align, sometimes that means very difficult decisions, but only they can decide that. So in our 11 years, we've had this, like, I'm growing, he's growing, you know what I mean? It's kind of been like, and sometimes it's been long gaps. Like, it's not like, you know, I'm growing and then 2 weeks later he starts growing. Sometimes it's been like a year and a half, you know, and it's like, but I'm in it because I know, like, I can see the wheels turning, and I can see the growth happening, and I know what we both want. We both have long-term goals. We talk about that together. It might take one of us longer to get there at times, depending on where we're at, but there's this mutual understanding of where we're trying to go. And sometimes I think you have to have that with your partner as well. Like, where are we both trying to go? They might be two totally different directions, but are we aiming for something bigger?
Are you a supportive part of my journey?
Yeah.
I also try to have these conversations with my husband, and he's not necessarily the kind that wants to sit there and talk about our feelings. My idea of a great date, literally us staring at each other and talking about what the universe is and like what planets are spinning. And like, I'm like, what? So you think you were a starseed from like somewhere else? Like, I just want to get, I want to know your mind so intimately, and that we're like naked in our souls. Like, that's all I want. And my husband's like, can you just watch the show like that we're fucking watching? I'm just trying to finish this episode. And I'm just like, no, but this reminded me of our souls, you know, and I just want to go to the pretty depth of everything. And my husband's just like, I love you. You're so crazy. But like, can we please get back to what we were doing? So
Can we watch the show? Yeah.
So poor him, but like, bless him for, you know, loving that I'm so different. Like, literally doesn't get it, but he respects it. And this, I think that's
the ultimate thing, is the respect piece. Like, we can be totally different, and we can like love each other in exactly who we are and all of our pieces. And again, like, if I'm triggered by something, I'm just like, okay, well, that's mine. So where is that coming from? Let me go work on that, you know, and I'll come back and it'll all be okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I just want to bring awareness to something that I think might be helpful to the person listening to this. Sometimes you are growing at such a fast pace that your partner needs to kind of calibrate to, oh my God, like, you were this version and now you're like different. And I'm not getting, like, I can't relate to you the same way. You used to say, you used to be cool with this. Now you're not cool with this.
Yeah.
Like, you're not tolerating the same shit. And it's almost like we have to constantly train each other in a way. Like, I know that sounds crazy, but we're kind of like training each other how to, like, what's the standard on how we want to be treated? What are you available for?
Exactly.
I think there comes a moment that we're like, okay, I'm just not willing to beat this dead horse anymore. Luckily, I haven't been even close to that, but there's been tough conversations and also tough adjustment periods where just like you in your marriage, like, I've grown fast, or he's grown fast, or for us, it was actually like, I was very depressed at one stage, and like, I was crying all the time, like and I had migraines at the time. I had health issues. Like, I couldn't function, and he just had patience and love and support. That's like, he was the best. You're like, and I needed that. And now I'm like fucking really thriving. I've got my shit going on. I'm living my purpose, making money from it. And he's just like, how do you do that? Like, you know? Now he's learning. But to touch on this, I actually like would love to go there for a second. Because my whole thing is about being enlivened, which means coming alive and truly honoring how you're made. What makes Macy feel enlivened?
Yeah. For me, it really is working on like breaking through things that I thought were going to hold me back forever. When I think of like my purpose, I really do feel it's to help other people just evolve and become their highest self. Like that is really my mission, to know, like, to help people create whatever it is that they want, and to know that they don't have to want all the things that I want or desire. They can have their own vision for their life, and to break through all those barriers that, you know, keep them from living that. Because the thing that plays in my mind all the time is, we have one shot at this. We have one shot, and life is just too short and not promised, and we don't know our timeline. And in a world where you could have it all and do it all and truly be happy and learn how to do that and heal, why live a minute, you know, like, why live any minute less than having that? And what are the things that keep you from having that? And that is, I feel like, my purpose. I just want people to become more self-aware and heal themselves and work on that, so that they can go and create whatever it is that they want.
I love that so much. I love that so much. As you know, I help people find their thing. I help people find their thing through metaphysics, and
yes, I love it.
Like sexy witchy tools.
Yeah. Yes, I love it.
It's all just the same thing. I'm just bringing concepts to bring awareness around things that they didn't have awareness on right away. It's like we're talking about the same thing. And then I feel like, in order for people to find their purpose, they're not finding it in a corner. They're not going to find it in a book. They have to peel a shit ton of layers through awareness, and then reveal. But it's always there. It's just a matter of seeing it and choosing that you deserve. Like, you don't need to plug yourself into an already existing job. You can create your job.
Yes.
Right.
Yes, you can. We've just been raised in a society where there's just limited thinking, and it's all from the running. Again, that autopilot, the running. This is what we're supposed to do. This is what we're supposed to do. And I think at some point, most people hit this place where they know they feel more, and they know that this is not it. But it's scary to explore that. And and you know that you're signing up for pain, you know, to experience that. And sometimes people's comfort overpowers what they're willing to endure in that journey. And so I have, you know, so much grace for everybody that decides that. For me, I am ready to lock arms with the people who are like, I'm willing to go through the depths of what this is to meet my true essence and my spirit, and go.
You said the depths. In my head, the song by Coolio started playing.
Yes, when I walk through the valley
of the shadow of death. And I'm like, you have to go through that. I want to end this episode by asking you, number one, like, where can people find you? And number two, what are your 3 favorite books that you would recommend?
Yes. So let me start with books. The books that I would recommend are The Angry Therapist by John Kim. There's another book called The Urban Monk. I love 10 Things Mentally Strong People Don't Do. Yeah, and it goes through like each of these areas of your life where you're like overcoming. We have in our dining room just this whole bookshelf, and we're like working on building a personal development library. So we have a ton of books.
Sure. Yeah. So your husband likes to read books too?
Yes, he is. He loves personal development books.
Oh, that's so fun.
Oh, there's one more. It's called Why You're Stuck. It's a white cover with a black box on it. And it's like, why you're stuck is stuck in the box. It's really cute, but it's another book that completely, at the time in my life, it came in the time that I needed it, and it blew up so much for self-awareness for me. So that's another one. And then as far as where people can find me, they can connect with me on Facebook. It's MACIE RENAE. Our podcast is called Becoming Your Highest Self, and you can find that on multiple platforms. Instagram is at MACIE RENAE _. And then my website, if you want to learn more about me, is MacieRenAe.com.
Macy, you have been such a gift for me personally. And I can't wait for everybody to hear what you have. I just want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.